and welcome to this, another Anchore open source gardening live stream. By gardening, I mean tending to the wonderful open source projects that we maintain. And joining me this week are Alex, Dan, Will, and Keith from the open source team. Hello, chaps. How are you doing?
Good. So far, pretty good.
Good. More from them in just a moment. I'd also like to welcome, if anyone's managed to stumble on us, we got an influx of subscribers to the channel after I did a community discussion with George Castro on, I think it was about a week ago, and he pointed his community at us, and we got an incredibly high number of views for that one video, and then a lot of subscribers off the back of it, which is lovely. So welcome to you if you're watching. What we do in this meeting is basically work, normal work that you do on an open source project, like go through issues, pull requests, questions. So if you have any questions, ping them in the chat in YouTube, which is down here, and we will say hello, and you can chat in there. So these are the main tools we tend to maintain and talk about Syft Grype, but there's a whole bunch of other stuff as well. Before we get going, though, I just wanted to mention on our blog, if you don't understand what we're talking about SBOMs and all that stuff, we've got a whole blog series going on this week. Every day this week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, there's been a new blog post that seeks to increase your knowledge about SBOMs and the ecosystem around it, and how you build them, why you build them, why they're important. And we're up to day 4 right now, which is SBOM Insights on LLMs, which is pertinent. But if you just go to anchor.com/blog, you'll find all of them on the front page of the blog, which is cool. And they all link to each other, so you'll be able to find them. We also have Discourse. If you go to anchor.com/discourse, you'll find a thread each week where we talk about and link to this session here. And has anyone got anything before we start diving in? Anyone got anything they want to mention or bring up?
No burning questions or topics for me here.
Oakley dokley. So I've already jumped on the triage train, and the triage train has a few that well, this one we talked about a little bit, but not everyone was here, and I did summarize it on the Discourse. I used let me find last week's one. It'll be in the announcements, May the 1st. So I got an LLM to summarize the video, and way down the bottom, where was it? No, I could have sworn I had it in here. Oh, there we go. It's this one here. So it was set for needs discussion because wider, we didn't have everyone here last week. And so we thought, well, we should probably talk about this a little bit more widely and whether we want to include this this tool. So for those who don't know, someone filed an issue suggesting we consider using an AI tool to do the first pass review at pull requests. Not that we would only rely on this tool, because obviously you need humans in the loop. But I'm picking this one up because not everyone got to talk about it last week. I know Chris voiced concerns about it. I think his concerns were mostly on the it will mean people take their foot off the accelerator and will not try as hard and be as conscientious when they contribute, because they'll know that there's this LLM that's going to pick stuff up at the other end. And in fact, some people will be using LLMs to create the code in the first place. So it's like multiple LLMs talking to each other within our pull requests. I think that's the gist of what Chris said, but I got the bot to summarize it, and there's a link to that timestamp if anyone wants to watch that from last week. Anyone else got any other opinions or feelings, strong or otherwise?
Where we left this was we were researching, like integrating it with a toy repo, and maybe someone's able to report back from that research.
Yeah, I volunteered for that one. There was actually 2 things in the same topic. I basically needed either a small tool repo or a toy repo. Try it out on them. So CodeRabbit for this, specific request. Then also swapping out Dependabot for Renovate was the other task, and they just are both perfectly fit for like, we need to actually go try it and configure it somewhere. So I think it was supposed to be a toy repo, like you said, Will, because then it's easier to like try out the auth, outside of like say the Anchore org, and then if we buy into it, go to the extra effort to get the auth baked into the org. So yep.
I completely missed that. Was that something we?
I think it was a stand-up.
Okay, so it might not have been on the stream that it was discussed. Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
Thanks for picking that up, Will.
I throw needs discussion on a Grype issue if we want to discuss that really quick.
Before we finish this one, do we want to put a comment on this so that we, like, Alex, do you want to put a comment on this so that I don't look at this again? And,
sure. I can do that.
That would be cool.
We could probably
I might stick it on one of my nonsense open source things then, because it's free for open source, right?
I believe that's what it said on the website. Yeah.
Okay. Well, what's the worst that could happen, as they say?
Something Skynet
that OAuth token has.
Yes. And Will, you said you've tagged one as a needs discussion. Bob, is it this one? PHP Peckle?
Yeah, and I have a comment about what I want to talk about. So this is a really old false positive, and just a little bit of background. So NVD is the National Vulnerability Database, at least while we still have one, and it uses a machine readable way of naming software, right? If you want to have a vulnerability database, you have to have a machine readable way of describing a software product. And they use one called CPE, which is the Common Platform Enumeration, I think. And the problem with it is that the way it's used, nobody ever specifies the language ecosystem or package format. So it dates from a time when, the software you had was like Microsoft Windows or Sun Solaris or something. And so vendor name was a good way of identifying software. And so I think he's probably going to show us CPE maybe, but so the problem with that is it doesn't specify the language ecosystem. It specifies vendor product. And you run into frustrating situations where there's this product called Docker by a company called Docker. And so the CPE for that starts CPE A for application, Docker. And then there's also, a Python client for talking to the Docker server. And obviously the company that provides that to the world is called Docker, and you do pip install Docker. So the CPE for that is Docker. And so we end up with a class of false positive that's like an ecosystem mismatch, where if we try to compare, if Syft finds a PyPy package called Docker, then especially if it can find a vendor name like Docker is a very reasonable CPE to generate, but that will match a bunch of vulnerabilities that have to do with the container runtime of the Python client, where it makes these sort of frustrating false positives where it's obvious to any human who looks at the vulnerability that this is a vulnerability in the server product, not the client product. But they have similar CPEs, and the CPE format is not great for telling those apart. So what's going on in this issue is somebody wrote a PHP extension for talking to Redis, the key value store server. And when Syft finds that extension, it makes a package called Redis, because that's the name of the extension. And the CPE it has is Redis. And then it gets a bunch of false positives that are really against Redis, the server, not against this sort of PHP extension, which I imagine is a much smaller project. So all that to say that, like, so normally when we match against GitHub security advisories, if we're matching like an ecosystem, like for NPM or Ruby gems or something, we don't compare to NVD because of this problem. We compare to GitHub security advisories. But GitHub security advisories doesn't cover PHP native extensions. So we have a package that, falls through to the like most fallback, least preferred matching, which is CPE matching against NVD. And it creates this false positive.
I'm just trying to find. Is that the kind of thing? There we go.
Yeah.
We use that's
Right,
the
right,
kind of thing
right.
you're talking about, right?
Right, exactly. So what that says is that the stock matcher, that is the matcher that doesn't know what kind of thing it's looking at, right? This would say like the Python matcher or the RPM matcher or the APK matcher if we knew what kind of thing this is, but we don't have a special matcher for this. So we went all the way back to the stock matcher, and the stock matcher just looks at the CPE and it looks in the NVD database, and the NVD database says, hey, CPEA Redis at version 6 is vulnerable to this. And so here we have what, from a user's perspective, is like a frustratingly obvious false positive, because this is a PHP Redis client. It is not Redis, the server. And so it's obviously not vulnerable to the same set of vulnerabilities as Redis, the server. And this is why we prefer GHSAs or like distro feeds when we can, because they don't have this problem. If you scroll down, I made a suggestion that I hadn't thought of before in my last comment. Try to comment on these when I put needs discussion on them so that we don't wonder why I did that. So part of what's going on here is I'm just telling them that there's basically no good source of data for vulnerabilities about PHP PECL. I think they say PECL files because there's a little drawing of a pickle on there. And the GHSA doesn't cover the native extensions. They only cover PHP composer packages. And there's a Friends of PHP security advisories repo, which also doesn't cover the native extensions. And it says in its README that you're not supposed to use it. Basically, that's how I read that. So what I was sort of showing with those links basically is that we don't have a good source of information that says what this CVE is. And so what I'm proposing at the end is every now and then we run into a CPE that I think is clearly intended, a human would agree is clearly intended to refer to this big well-known project. And I wonder if we should do some kind of special casing there, right? Like if we come up with CPE MySQL or CPE Redis, is that worth saying, hey, probably this CVE is talking about the server product and not the 57 clients in different languages that have the same name. And that's sort of what I wanted to think is like, does it really make sense to fall back to does it make sense to fall back to saying, hey, we don't know the vendor, so we tried repeating the vendor name and the package name for such a well-known project? That's sort of my question for discussion.
I think the hard part is like Syft knowing that it's a well-known project. So it's given that it's just a string, like we'd have to have like Redis on the allow list to say like, oh, these are well-known projects.
Right.
Thus, there's only these ecosystems.
I think that's sort of an implementation detail, but that's also like we do that other places, right? Like we have a list of jars in Syft that don't have accurate group IDs in their manifest that's in the jar or the POM properties that's in the jar or whatever. So we literally have like, I think in source code still, maybe it's been moved, a list of like difficult to identify jars because it causes a huge amount of problems when you get the wrong group ID, then you can't like do vulnerability searches right. And we also have the binary classifier catalogers, which is effectively a hard-coded list of well-known binaries. So I think that like it, and also we've often talked about making Syft have a database so that at runtime it can download like a key value lookup of like digests of .jar files to like the actual Maven records so that we're not guessing. as much by inspecting manifests and things. So I think this would be a candidate either for making a list of like super well-known CPEs and putting it in Syft source code, or a candidate for generating that list at build time. Like we already pull down a list of all CPEs and do stuff with it at build time. So we could do some stats on that to try to find these super common CPEs maybe. We just have a list in source code somewhere. So like, let's assume for a moment that we can deliver a correct list of these projects to Syft at runtime somehow and just hand wave over it and then talk about whether it's a good idea. Does that make sense?
But what are the things that we could do before delivering like a large list like that? Like the one thing that comes to mind is like we have the target software field in CPEs. Like it could be that for PHP we always set the target software to PHP. And I know that only deals with PHP and that's one issue, but it
Dan?
I sorry if this is a tangent. I don't think it is, but I think it's a really interesting idea to invert this, right? Because like we've done this in the past. You're right, Will, where there's like a hard-coded list of like, if you see this material, this is the right CPE. But I don't know if we've considered doing the other way around, which is like we know that a CPE that says what is this one? It's saying PHP.
So this is Redis.
Oh, sorry, Redis. That's a C program. Like if your software is PHP or Python or Ruby or Java, its CPE would never be Redis. Right? So it's kind of interesting to think of it from that perspective, like actually encode knowledge about a CPE rather than encoding knowledge about a piece of software. As to, you see what I mean?
Are we already doing this and we just need to add it to PHP and I didn't know about it?
Yeah, well, sort of. I think there might be a little bit of a something slightly different that we want to do here, but we do have the links that we're seeing on the screen. We do
Python, Redis.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, exactly. And so like we have ways to remove things. And so like this one, I guess would be like Ruby or the other thing is potentially, but it's not great. It would be great to have like a data feed that we could like dynamically like.
Yeah,
sure. But there's also like one place to put a PR to fix this particular false positive, right? I could add to this that you're not allowed to have a PHP PECL package called Redis with a CPE Redis, and stuff would start obeying that. And I think that's sort of what I was proposing. The way I had thought about it originally was basically like having a list of super well-known binary server packages, right? Like, Redis, MySQL, Nginx, like that. Maybe we could think of a few others. And just say that like language ecosystems should not be matching on those CPEs. Like if you have a non-binary package, you should not be raising up a CPE that looks like the like canonical MySQL project, or that looks like the canonical Redis project.
Right. I mean, I think it would be, we should, when target software is not set in those cases, we take it out. But like if target software is set, we allow it. So then you could distinct clients.
But doesn't NDB never set target software? Like if you go look at these CPEs, does anybody set?
It's sometimes.
Yeah. But sometimes
it's not perfect, but there are a lot, like thousands of examples where they do, and it does, it would prune all of the cases that I think you're talking about, where it's like, oh, here's the server implementation, the client in this other language should never match the server implementation. And I think the only, I think that the exceptions to that are if you have a server Python implementation and a client Python implementation and they have the same name, then like you need something else other than like the target software to distinct them.
I don't think I understand that suggestion.
Like using target software, or
so let's say Syft, right? So that's on the Syft CPE generation side, right? So I'm Syft. I find a PHP PECL entry for the Redis PHP extension, and then I'm making a CPE, and I'm like, hey, Redis is a well-known package, so I'm going to set the target software field in the CPE to be PHP or PHP-extension or something.
Yeah.
Then at match time, we're going to have Grype is going to have a CPE that's like CPA, because target software is one of these stars farther right, isn't it?
Yeah.
So Grype at match time will have CPEA Redis ::::::::::::::::::::::::::::::::::::::::::::::::::::::::::: and then it matches anyway.
Yeah.
Because these like, and I think so. What I'm trying to do is encode the assumption that if somebody just put in the NVD database, if they just put CPEA Redis, and then all stars, the only package that should match is the actual Redis server binary.
Yeah.
Is sort of what I wanted, because that's got to be what they meant. They would have said it's a Python package if it was a Python package, right? Or they should have.
Yeah. Me and Weston definitely had a debate in like the V6, the Grype DB V6 work about when your search input is specific, or becomes more specific, that there's a expectation that your results should narrow. Thus, like for the example of like, even though the vulnerability record has a star for target software, it would be excluded. I need to go back and look to see what the result of that conversation was, but I believe we match on it, just like what you said. Thus, like supplying target software in this case does not help. So, shucks.
I think that exclusion mechanism, probably extending it to have a PHP entry, is a good short-term fix for this particular issue. But it's something to think about, that maybe like, I don't know, maybe when we do add a Syft database, we end up with a like list of known to be problematic and overly general CPEs or something like that.
I mean,
So that's the SBOM.
in terms.
That's the right one, isn't it? That's, yeah, it's the same. Oh no, that's the layer chart. Okay. Is it
What are you
Redis.reg?
looking for?
Well, I was just saying, what found it? I wasn't found, wasn't it?
It was found by the PHP PECL serialized cataloger. That's at the very top line of your terminal as it's shared.
Right. But the one that it, oh God, I can't see because the, what was it? Redis.reg is the one that happened to be this is the Grype output, right?
Yeah, so that artifact is effectively what Syft fed into Grype in this scan.
Yeah.
So a match is two things. It's an artifact and a vulnerability. And so this is the artifact. So this is the package. And so basically what I'm trying to say is that like we have that type PHP PECL, and then we have the CPE Redis, which matches a super well-known C server binary. And so we should just know that like, hey, there are not PHP packages that should get that CPE. We write that down somewhere, I think is what I'm proposing. But it sounds like somebody already thought of that and even implemented it. They just missed PHP. So
I have a
That's kinda
question
funny.
though. So, like using this as an example, what is the right CPE? Is it just adding the target software, or should this be something else like Redis-PHP extension, or like what? Do we know what it should be?
I thought that they
Yeah.
put that somewhere. There was a discussion of that earlier. Somebody mentioned.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why this isn't just like a solved problem, right? Because the only sources that I know of, like NVD posts a thing called the CPE dictionary, which in principle should be all of the CPEs that can be used. So if your software is in there, then it should be a way to be like, what is the CPE for this piece of software? Unfortunately, through analysis, we found if you look at all of the vulnerabilities and the CPEs in the vulnerability data, not every one of them is in the dictionary. So
Right.
there's this concept like, well, software doesn't publish its own CPEs almost ever. And so we have to invent something. If we don't know what to invent, removing one is a good step because it eliminates false positives. But then the question is, what should it be? If there's no prior vulnerability against that piece of software, then we don't know. So the manual investigation we usually do is like, go to that project, see if they've ever registered a CVE, find out what they said its CPE is, translate it to that, or think about how to automatically generate it. That's the best I can think of to get like accuracy.
Right. So that's and that's sort of the balance here. The reason I keep focusing on these like well-known server processes is because we expect the ratio of false positives to false negatives to be like very favorable if we like stop emitting PHP packages with the CPE. But if the, you know, if the CPE was like some, you know, common PHP package, which I can't think of one, then we wouldn't be able to do that, right? Because it would be, you know, the risk is that someone really did file a CVE against the Python PHP Redis extension and put that CPE in it, and that we're causing a false negative. And there's nothing in the rules that say that can't happen. I think what we're trying to do is encode the heuristic that the overwhelming majority of CPEs that start CPE, you know, A, Redis, refer to the server binary and not to some other product. So anyway, it sounds like we have a short-term fix, and this remains sort of a long-standing problem. If anybody's aware of a machine-readable database for vulnerabilities reported against PHP PECL extensions, that would be cool to know about. I couldn't find one.
Can I ask a dumb question that may have been already completely covered by everything you've all just said, but I don't understand why we know PHP PECL, right? Because we know this is PHP because it was found by the right cataloger for this kind of file.
Right. Yes.
Why are we allowing this to get that CP? And I just feel like there's some kind of heuristic, not necessarily a lookup table, but a heuristic, which is like
so what we do, like when we find a package, yeah. So the reason it falls through to the stock matcher is because it doesn't have a more specific matcher, right? And so like when we are scanning a container, like let's say we find a D package, then we'll say like, okay, we found a D package. ETCOS release says this is Ubuntu 18.04. So that's where we go look for vulnerabilities, right? We go ask we look in our database and say, what did Ubuntu disclose, right? And then for GitHub security advisories for language ecosystems, we prefer to use GitHub security advisories. So if we find an NPM package, we'll ask the GitHub security advisory data we've written down, what is this vulnerable to? The problem is that PHP PECL packages are not covered by GHSA. Like these native extensions are not covered by GHSA. So we have no better place to look than NVD. We spell through the case statement. So yeah.
Well, I kind of have, you know, so Will, you're saying like, okay, yeah, we did find the spot in code where we have this list already. And we kind of know, ideally, we would want that to leave the source code and be some other distributed list. There's a kind of a secondary proposal here, which is, well, instead of just having a separate list that has to do with like on the Syft side for identification, because we kind of know that this cataloger should be producing like target software of PHP because it is, we know it's for PHP. Knowing, Will, what you said, like, hey, this still won't help because there's a star in that field for the server, for any CVE that, you know, that has a CVE with the target software for server implementation. It's like, so close. Well, this is where I feel like instead of having a Syft enhancement where we ship a separate list, really like trying to classify the CVE records to say like, oh, this is for this CVE is describing Redis. It has Redis as the CPE of the star. And then we're able to classify, oh, this is a C, they're talking about the C application. Thus we can attempt to get the right target software in the CPE on the original record, that's where I feel like that would be the most good. I don't think I know what the right value should be for target software there. And I think for some ecosystems it gets a little squirrely. Like my favorite example is like TensorFlow. It's like, well, yeah, all of the CVEs, you look at it, a classifier looks at the text is going to say, this is talking about some C application, but it's really packaged for Python. It's truly a Python application in spirit. So you have like a lot of those weird edge cases. And then for C, like say you do run across some C thing, like, or the server implementation, like, well, do you put C as the ecosystem that as the target software there? It's a little odd, but maybe it's okay. What if you have a client that's the same, language as the server implementation? How do you distinct those? So there's still some gotchas there.
Right. And so then the proposal there is sort of twofold. One, Syft could put the target software in the CPE, right? Syft generated a CPE with everything as stars except vendor, product, and version. There's a lot of other fields. We could put stuff in those. So we try to put stuff in those. And then maybe on the Grype side, we try to say like, hey, this CVE appears to be against this like well-known server product. It should not match anything that has the target software set or something like that. Like, so we try to like sort of improve the CPE that Syft makes and improve the CPE that's or the CPE searching functions in Grype. That's an interesting idea. That might be better than just sort of prohibiting certain CPEs from being generated for certain package types, which is what we have today. What are all of the fields in a CPE? I don't know. Mostly I try to avoid CPEs rather than learn more about them.
Can I ask another dumb question? Is it possible? I don't think we have an environment variable or config option to turn off that default matcher, do we? Like, what if I didn't? If I did that, if I could have that, right? Are we more likely to get a ton of false negatives because we've got no CPE in there?
Yeah, like
I think that's the concern.
Yeah, the way to think about the stock matcher, it's a catch-all, but we make matchers when there is specific business logic that should be considered at runtime. But there's plenty of ecosystems where there is no specific logic that really needs to be encoded. Thus, the stock matcher works great for. So it's less of like the catch-all, I don't know what to do with it. It's more of like this is what you do for the standard case. Like, we'd probably be, the standard case matcher might have been a slightly better name, or, but you could turn off CPE matching, I think, for the stock matcher, and you'd still run into the same problem of like a bunch of false negatives there. But
right, and that's the really hard thing with working on this, is that there's all kinds of like, you make a change. That's how we ended up with like a hard-coded list of jars, is because we would change like what order, like look at POM XML, look at POM properties, look at this manifest field, look at this manifest field, look at this manifest field, and it would fix 18 jars and break 20 jars. And so it's like, it's really hard because like, obviously we don't know at runtime, like whether this was a false positive or not. If we did, we could just display the right thing. But yeah, I think the concern is that turning off the stock matcher is going to result in a lot of false negatives.
So was the ultimate decision that there should be a section in here for PHP?
Oh yeah, I mean, definitely.
Yeah. So it's just like
I had forgotten about this.
Yeah, it's like that one at the top of the change where this literally says like, do not make a Python package called Redis. Presumably because if you want to talk to Redis from Python, you do pip install Redis, and people were tired of all these false positives. So I think that there should be an entry in here. I feel really silly that I invented this again instead of finding it, but
so
I
does that
forgot
mean
it existed, so I get that.
This is ready.
I knew. I knew about it.
And
since we started, I had been looking for this as soon as we started looking at this issue, and it still took me like 5 minutes to find it. It's hidden.
That's funny. Yeah, I think if somebody could link to that source code, we could even throw good first issue on here. People have been asking about this for a bit. So maybe we can post a comment and say like, hey, it turns out we already have a place to say language packages can't get special CPEs or something. Yeah. And then we can, remove needs discussion. And that's cool. This was an interesting discussion about like how to do it. But I think this is a pretty good first issue. So maybe somebody will do it. And I think it's ready because we know how to do it.
Nice.
Cool. All right.
Glad you brought it up. Brilliant. Oh, I closed the triage one. That one. So, what about that one? Is this the problem that triggers Josh whenever we mention it? Is this the zlib thing?
It might be. I think that one has a different CVE. You know, it's a frustrating CVE when I'm like, that CVE number looks familiar. But I think this might be a different one. So
do we have a reproducer? Is it just literally Grype? Jammy, is that 2204 JK? Yeah.
and I think what they're doing, that's interesting. So it looks like what they've done here is they found a Grype finding, and then they went and looked at the Debian changelog for that package. And that changelog mentions fixing the CVE. Can we go to Ubuntu's page for this CVE and just see what fixed version they list for 2204? I suspect this is something where we just believe Ubuntu and that they're asserting that Canonical are wrong about what fixed version should be published, but we'll see.
While we wait for the security page to load, Jammy updates.
Oh, I think this might have been fixed.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, go down further in the ticket. It looks like it looks like it was about the Gzip not being correctly associated with a Debian.
Oh, is this the thing? We have
Symlinks.
talked about this. So this was Symlink handling. So
Yeah. So actually, take a look at right there on the screen. Bin Gzip. So remember, there's the user merge that occurred, and so bin is a symlink to user bin. So we have a package that claims it owns a path that there is no real path for. So we have since fixed that a few weeks ago. Now, someone else brought up the inverse case that we need to solve, and where, okay, you have two packages. One writes the binary, and the other one writes a symlink to the binary. And right now, because of the fix we just did, we resolved the path to make certain it resolves to a real thing. Well, now it makes it look like that we have two packages that own the same thing, when in actuality, if we had done like an LSTAT equivalent, we would have seen, no, the first one that wrote the binary owns the package, and the second one, the path exists, but it's to the leaf is a symlink, so we should not say that it owns it. So yeah, we fixed this one, but then we now need to fix the other case.
Right. So what was going on, just to zoom out a second for people who want there, is that Syft, if it finds a binary, right? Syft finds some binaries basically by strings pipe grep, by saying like, hey, I found, Gzip 1.3.4 null byte in this binary. So I think this is a Gzip 1.3.4 executable. But if like a dpackage or an RPM owns the binary, we drop it because we have better metadata from the dpackage or the RPM. And what was happening here is we were following symlinks, I think, for files, but I think at least in the Ubuntu image we scanned, like user bin is a symlink to bin or vice versa. And we weren't following symlinks among the parent directories. So Syft wasn't realizing that user bin gzip was owned by the depackaged gzip because of a symlink in the parent path. So I think that's what was going on. So this is probably fixed. Cool.
So this is already fixed and we don't need to, we can close it? Have we
I'll
checked it?
go confirm, but I'm pretty certain it's fixed. I think it might have gotten, yeah, it got linked in the Syft issue, but it's not closed because this isn't Grype. So, yeah. So I'll probably go ahead and make a Syft PR that, you know, bumps Syft in Grype and closes this issue directly, so we don't lose it.
Sweet. Thanks for that. Have we talked about this one before? GraalVM and Oracle JDK. This is issue 3762 on Syft. Ah, there's a PR.
Oh, is it?
I think he PR his own repo. Maybe that's his way of doing a draft PR or something. He doesn't want us to it doesn't feel it's completely ready.
Well, it's not draft.
But it's not.
Yeah, I know it's not against.
I think it's a PR against his own repo, not to. So that's probably why we didn't see it. Is it's not a PR opened against the main Syft repo.
So is it worth us like trying this out against our repo?
Now, I'm trying to remember some of the details of this one. So it looks like we're getting some version parsing wrong, and he's implementing that such that we can detect, you know, the GraalVM version correctly. But that's where the familiarity drops off for me.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of interesting things in the PR, but I need to review in a little more detail.
Okay. Is it worth
lots of
us
tests too?
pinging them to say, hey, do you want to do this as a PR against upstream Syft rather than against your own repo? Or maybe you're right. Maybe he isn't ready to do that.
I'll comment on his PR.
Nice. Thanks for that. So that's those. And then we had these two, which I'm not sure we want to do. Do we?
Yeah, I think we could. Let's not do those on the air. Those are sort of
exactly.
Those are a little bit frustrating.
Yes. Okay, let's not do that then. And these are all people. These are all waiting response from other people, right?
Yep.
Not waiting for
Yep,
response.
that's what that means.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. I think with 15 minutes left to go, I think we're done for today. Unless anyone else has some burning issue they want to bring up. Look at that. I love it when that's clear. Anything else anyone has?
No, I think that's all I got. So
I will let you have those 15 minutes back because we've all been in meetings for the last 3 hours. So I'm fine. Thank you everyone for watching if you have, and we'll see you all again next time for more of this, where it might be another 15 minutes shorter and then another 15 minutes shorter if we keep powering through all these issues, which is great. Good work, everyone. See you all next time. Cheerio.
Excellent.
Cheers.